What the H, some people say to Dave Hooker. Nico Iamaleava will be better than the rest of the quarterbacks the Vols face in their upcoming opponents. Now, I think we can both agree that he will be better than whatever UTEP and Mississippi State serve up. We knew that at the beginning of the year, even if Nico was a disappointment. I don't think he's been a disappointment at any times this year. I just think he's been a redshirt freshman. Now, Carson Beck's a senior. Carson Beck is a player who has started about 15 more games and played in about 3 more seasons than Nico Iamaleava. Therefore, you would naturally assume he's better. And we'll get to out of respect, and all respect is due to this man, Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. But let's start with Carson Beck. I believe firmly that the Vols will have a quarterback, at least equality, but I will say a potential advantage because I think Nico is the more talented of the two players, and I think Carson Beck has regressed. And this is why I love spending a good part of my day reading your comments on YouTube. So please put those up as often as you can because I do read them. And when they're really compelling, I respond. If they're making fun of the bags under my eyes or Caleb's hair, then I try not to respond because that just drives the algorithm and gets more responses. Your hair looks fantastic, Caleb. The bags under my eyes, not so great. It's called getting old. But
does my hair look sexy? Push it back.
Somebody brought up this point. Carson Beck just doesn't look the same without Brock Bowers. Now, I know we're talking about a tight end, but Tennessee has not looked the same offensively since being without Caleb.
Jalen Hyatt, Cedric
Tillman. Jalen Hyatt. So is there something to that in a way different approach? The two do work the middle of the field. And I think that's almost like shooting. I think great shooters have an innate ability. The Ray Allens of the world, the Reggie Millers of the world. I think you can get slightly better at shooting. I don't think you can get great. I think there's something to be said for having a feel for working the middle of the field. So I would say that without Brock Bowers, that could be the reason. Now, you brought up yesterday, he just puts the ball in harm's way too often, and I'm with you on that. But perhaps some of that's because he doesn't have a safety valve in Brock Bowers, who you and I would agree is one of the best tight ends that has played during our lifetime. Caleb, what do you make of Carson Beck's regression? And what do you make of my assertion that Nico Iamaleava could actually be better in the Georgia game than Carson Beck, who a lot of people think is going to go in the top 5 first picks of the NFL draft?
I agree with you. And I'm going to add a little bit more to this. If you remember, Dave, last year, it wasn't just Brock Bowers they lost. They lost Ladd McConkey, who, by the way, is playing great at receiver right now with the Chargers in the NFL. And both of them were hurt in November. You don't think that had something to do with them losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game? Now, I know Carson Beck's stat line was technically good. He completed 72% of his passes for like 243 yards. And he didn't throw an interception, but he didn't have any touchdown passes. So yeah, I think that's been a big issue. I got 2 philosophies on this. Not just that Nico, I think, is better. I think Nico has better coaching. I think Mike Bobo is not a good offensive coordinator. I've been sticking by that for a long time now, and I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. They'll say that Mike Bobo, didn't they say he developed Aaron Murray, Dave, or not Aaron Murray, Matthew Stafford? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not buying that. I think Matthew Stafford just had some raw talent, and that you and I could have coached him into an NFL draft pick.
Oh, yeah, and then he practically had to be recoached in the NFL.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's be honest with you. Things didn't work out for the Lions, and he had to go get recoached by an offensive guru and Sean McVay to win a championship. And that's happened before with Tennessee players. I told you the story about Jabari Greer. He showed up at the Buffalo Bills, and they said, take a year off, forget everything you've been taught in college.
Right.
So whether it's Bowers or whether it's coaching, you would think Tennessee would have the advantage in both of those as a better offensive coach than what Georgia has now. I like Tennessee's tight ends a lot. They don't have Brock Bowers. So maybe in a roundabout way that furthers my point, Caleb.
There's another layer to this.
Give me the other layer.
Leadership. I think, and I mean this in a serious way, guys. You watch this all the time in the NFL. You see players play harder for some quarterbacks than others. I'll give you an example. You're a Cowboy fan, Dave. Actually, I still maintain that I think Tony Romo had a better arm than Troy Aikman. But I will give you, I think Troy Aikman was a better leader. So I think many players played harder for Troy Aikman than they did Tony Romo. And
there were two different times. It was about throwing over the top when Troy threw it. We don't know if Troy could have thrown it with different arm angles and all of that. That wasn't a thing until roundabout when Tony Romo came on. But anyway.
Okay. The other level of this is, so everybody talks about how Aaron Rodgers receivers never really step up for him in the playoffs the way Tom Brady's did. That's certainly true, but I think Tom Brady had the type of leadership qualities that made players want to step up for him in the playoffs. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers has that. A great example of this is the Super Bowl between Peyton Manning and Cam Newton. Dave, you know Peyton Manning was on one leg in that Super Bowl, basically. He was a shell of himself. Cam Newton was the better quarterback. He was the MVP of that year. Didn't it feel like Denver's players really wanted to win Peyton Manning that Super Bowl a lot more than Carolina's players wanted to win Cam Newton that Super Bowl?
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. And I think leadership is a big part of it. And I think Nico has that. And from what I've been told, has been starting to display that recently by going to guys that have made mistakes and kind of cheering them up. Well, previously, who did that for Nico just a couple of weeks ago? It was Cooper Mays. So I don't think that you can go out there and say, hey, I am going to have my great leadership skills on display after I play poorly on Saturday. I think you have to play well. So now that Nico has played well and he's gotten a couple of clutch wins, and what he did in the second half of the Alabama game was huge and had to win over a lot of people on that football team, there's no question that Nico's a better leader. I said this yesterday, but I'll repeat it. I know what Carson Beck drives. It's a Lambo, and that's fine. I love fast cars. If I had the option of spending way too much money at 21, 22 years old, it would probably be on a fast car. And I'd probably not be here doing the show with Caleb because I would have killed myself. But you don't see Nico taking pictures of his fast car, and cars, plural. And I know what they are. I know where he bought them. And there's no point in me sharing it. That's not my point. But with Nico too, what did he do with the Beats by Dre thing? Have you noticed that every single player, I mean, the backup long snapper, gets off of that team bus and has Beats by Dre over his ears? Everybody got a piece of that, Caleb, and he didn't have to do that.
No, he didn't. That's a great point. And this is, I mean, we joke about this all the time. It's the really wealthy ones don't flash their wealth. Like the joke, and the great leaders, the great multimillionaires in sports don't flash it like the way the lesser ones do. So for Carson Beck to flash his Lambo was a little bit odd. I mean, I'll just say like Michael Jordan and LeBron are two of the richest people of all time. I don't think I ever saw them flash their wealth in front of a bunch of other teammates ever. And
thank you. And yeah, we're talking about, I mean, if we're talking about 100 Beats by Dre that are $160, we're talking about what? That would be $16,000?
$16,000 maybe, yeah.
Okay, so Nico is not money grubbing, but he could have done this if he wanted to. He could have said, as opposed to all those Beats by Dre for my teammates, I think I'd just rather have that cash. I'll tell you somebody that did do that I think we're all fans of. At least we were at the time. Bruce Pearl, when things were going down in flames, essentially had no leverage to get his buyout. And they said, here is the number you can get. How do you want to divvy this up among your assistant coaches? And it was far less than his buyout was going to be and didn't include any buyouts for his assistant coaches. And his answer was, I'll take it.
Sounds like a Bruce Pearl move. Sounds like a Bruce Pearl move. I mean,
that's, I know somebody that was in the meeting and he goes, all right, I'm glad we negotiated that. I'll take it.
Let's, so just for a heads up, the other quarterbacks that Nico is going to play, by the way, is going to be Skylar Locklear for UTEP or Cade McDonald. Neither of them is good. Nico's better than them. That's on UTEP. On Mississippi State, he's going to play Michael Van Buren Jr., not Martin Van Buren, the president who succeeded Andrew Jackson in 1840.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes. I assume he's better than both of those. Let's throw out Diego Pavia, though, Dave. I mean, we're talking about a quarterback who single-handedly has put Vanderbilt in the top 25 by himself.
Absolutely. And and he's a better, tougher runner. And I don't want to dismiss him at all. And as a matter of fact, Diego Pavia is pull up. I hate it when they do yards per game. It's so silly. He's the third highest rated quarterback behind Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe in the SEC at 151.8. Nico is 144.6. Those are pretty close, pretty negligible. But as you pointed out yesterday, with the competition that Nico has played, you could make an argument that Diego Pavia is more of an MVP to his team, and you could argue a better player.
He also leads his team in rushing with 563 yards on the ground.
True. Okay, so there are two different arguments to be had. I will say that from a talent perspective, that's going to shine through, and Nico's going to be a higher rated draft pick. But if you want to say who's having the better season this year, Diego Pavia, and given the fact that Tennessee's receivers haven't really stepped up for the Vols, which we're going to discuss with John Adams later, then I don't think there's any question you could make a strong argument for Diego Pavia. Maybe more so than Carson Beck, because guys, Georgia and Tennessee are closer than they may ever be in the way they're approaching the game. Caleb, they both have what? Very good defenses and so-so offenses. Yep. And right now, Nico's not turning the ball over, but Carson Beck is. Get your thoughts on that. What the H, brought to you by Medicare Misty.
19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
All right, Caleb, what do you take on that? That Nico is far more talented, but if somebody wants to argue Diego Pavia has been a bigger impact for his team, I can't argue that.
All right, going to this point, if Nico keeps up the way he played last game, I test alone, I can't say that Diego Pavia is better than Nico Iamaleava. I think if Nico plays...
Or even last 6 quarters.
Yeah, the last 6 quarters. I think Nico, the last 6 quarters, is better than Diego Pavia. Now, Nico, as the conglomerate of the whole season, Diego's probably better. But the way the corner that Nico has turned since the second half of Alabama, that Nico turned corner is better than Diego Pavia. And as somebody brought up, like Diego Pavia puts up a lot of stats, but it ain't like Vanderbilt's like blowing people out of the building with their offense, guys. I mean, they're dropping 20 to 24 points a game maybe to win. So I think that by the end of the year, I do think Nico will be better than Diego Pavia. And Dave, then we get to something a little bit deeper on this because, Tennessee might go to Atlanta. I don't really care if they go to Atlanta, and I don't think Tennessee should care if they go to Atlanta. They shouldn't want to go to Atlanta, but they might. Then he'll start facing maybe, could he face a Connor Wagman at Texas A&M? Could he get a rematch with Carson Beck at Georgia? Could he still be the best quarterback that he's going to face the rest of the year? What happens with his college football playoff opponents? What if he gets a group of 5 draw in the first round? What if he then goes to play, BYU in the second round? I mean, are we talking about the possibility, Dave, that Nico is better than every quarterback he's going to face on the remainder of the schedule, including the postseason?
Okay, well, that depends. And it reminds me of looking at our YouTube analytics, okay? Because there are moments where they spike, and that's what he's done over the past 6 quarters, right? He spiked. Yep. But really, it's been a gradual trend up. So if it's a gradual trend up and not, we've seen the arrival of Nico and or he considers to spike in the regard that he has, then no, I think he'll face a Quinn Ewers or someone else that's a better quarterback. But I still think Jackson Dart is probably the best quarterback in the SEC. If they face Jackson Dart in some way, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think Ole Miss is going to make the playoff, and I think they would keep SEC teams away as much as they could. But I will tell you this. I think that would be the one quarterback that would stand out in my mind. And then you would have to include, Dillon Gabriel. What other quarterbacks would you include that even if Nico continues to trend upwards, he's not going to reach them? Or are there any?
The obvious one is Cam Ward at Miami, who is the runaway Heisman favorite at this point. I mean, he's having a Cam Newton type season at Miami. I don't even think there's any question. He might play himself into a top 5 draft pick because of the way he's played. So there's Cam Ward. After Cam Ward, we're probably talking about, you're right, Dillon Gabriel, who was a late bloomer. I mean, I'm not even going to give anybody Quinn Ewers because you just don't know if he's healthy this year. So Dillon Gabriel, Cam Ward, maybe Will Howard. We just watched Nico go against Jalen Milroe, and I mean, Nico played better than Jalen Milroe in that game by any reasonable definition of playing well. You know, if LSU can find their way into the playoff, Garrett Nussmeier may be on that level, like you talked about with Jackson Dart. But the only clear-cut ones, I mean, unless Tennessee faces Oregon, Ohio State, or Miami, I can't out and out say that Nico won't be the best quarterback on the field. And I get that Curtis Rourke for Indiana has insanely good stats too, but Indiana played a game without Curtis Rourke and still won in dominating fashion with Taven Jackson, former Vol quarterback. And Indiana hasn't played anybody. They played the worst schedule in human history for a Power 5 school.
Okay, so my Twitter tease may have been off a little bit. I said, can Nico be top 5 quarterback by the end of the year? Top 5 nationally? Am I underselling it?
I think there are really good quarterbacks of teams that I don't think will end up in the playoff, and that's what's hurting Nico. So Cam Ward's going to end up in the playoff. That's in Nico's way. Dillon Gabriel's probably ahead of Nico right now. Jackson Dart's probably ahead of Nico. So Cam Ward, Dillon Gabriel in the playoff. Outside of the playoff, I think Jackson Dart's not going to make the playoff, and you said you have him over Nico. Shedeur Sanders isn't going to make the playoff. As of right now, Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback than Nico. I just don't think we can debate that. And
I would agree with that. So I have no problem agreeing with that. And he's the only one. See, I give Jackson Dart the advantage over Nico because he's got a little bit more time under his belt. But Shedeur Sanders is the only one that's playing college football right now that I truly believe has more talent than Nico from top to bottom. Nico, by the way, is ranked 64th in – blaming it got me on that yards per game again. My apologies. Shedeur Sanders, for the record, is number 10 in passing rating. Jackson Dart is number 1. Cam Ward is number 5. Will Howard of Ohio State is number 3. Now let me get to Diego Pavia's number 26, who we mentioned. Nico Iamaleava is 38. So we're not saying that at the end of the year that Nico is going to be considered one of the top quarterbacks in the nation based off his cumulative work, but I think he could be in the top 5. I don't think that's a reach whatsoever, Caleb.
No, I mean, yeah, I think so too. I think by the end of the year, you can definitely see that.